Joining us now to explain more is travel expert Simon Calder and former pilot Lord Tunnicliffe. So welcome to you both.
Welcome.
Dennis, let's start with you first of all. 350 737 MAX 8s in operation, flown by 54 airlines. There are 5,011 on order. It's the fastest selling plane in history. Two major crashes, 157 just died. The Lion Air crash in Indonesia, 189. What's wrong with it?
Well, it has a system which pilots aren't trained about to compensate from some of the aerodynamic problems Boeing encountered in developing the aeroplane. That system seems to have malfunctioned, overridden the pilot's input, and created a situation where the aeroplane was going too fast and it crashed into the ground. The second event seems very similar.
Well, it has larger engines, they're set further forward, and so the plane has a tendency to pitch differently to other Boeing 737s. And so this piece of software has been put in to solve this pitch issue. The pilots have said Boeing has failed to communicate a very significant change to the way the 737 flies. After the Indonesian crash, you would expect that the first thing every pilot would know was how to switch this off if it happened.
Yes, the crash and the publicity undoubtedly educated the pilot community, and that would increase safety overall. But as I understand it so far, Boeing have not mandated the training about this particular facility on their aircraft.
This is, as somebody that's a little bit of a nervous flyer, this is sort of a horrible thought, really. You rely on the fact that, you know, all the systems are in place, that they're very professional, they know exactly what all the safety checks are put in place. What does this mean for us as a passenger? Should we be worried?
It is absolutely going to alarm a lot of passengers. If I can just take you back to 1 o'clock yesterday, this was when the Civil Aviation Authority announced that it was going to ban this aircraft, the 737 MAX 8, from the UK skies. At that point, you had the bizarre situation of two flights from Istanbul, one to Birmingham, one to Gatwick. Thousands of people across the United States were boarding the very same aircraft. It's a prescription for insecurity among people who do feel alarmed. The fact that Boeing and the Federal Aviation Administration in America say there is no reason for grounding this plane. The UK, the European...
So why have they got such differing opinions? It doesn't make sense. Surely a fact is a fact, isn't it?
Well, the trouble is we are talking here about trying to get a black and white answer to what's a very grey issue. Aviation safety is formidably successful. I know that when Dennis was an aircraft captain, and I, of course, defer to his professional expertise, he was flying at a time when crashes, very sadly, were very frequent. Now they are extremely rare. And our deepest sympathy goes to the victims of that aircraft. But you are never going to get absolute agreement among aviation professionals about what's safe, what isn't. But I think you have to have a united front so that all the regulators say either it's going to be grounded or it's not.
You see these sort of air crash investigator programmes on the TV, and you watch a terrible accident, and then the black box data recorders are recovered, and they find out what it was, and then whatever caused it, you know, we're told this will never happen again. Things have been learnt. We've put things into process to make they're flying even safer. So were they right to ground these planes? Because if you know, just as someone who gets on planes occasionally, you have the European Union, India, other countries who've grounded these planes. The Americans haven't grounded them yet. I'm assuming that the pilots who are flying those planes don't know how to turn this thing off.
I think the authorities that have grounded the aeroplanes have made the right decision. You're quite right to point out that aviation safety is so good because most decision-making is internationally consensus decision-making. This is unusual to have a different point of view. But the authorities, ESA in Europe, etc., have a responsibility to make a decision about safety, and I believe in the circumstances they've made the right decision. There's not black and white decisions. These are decisions of degree, but the conclusion they've come seems to me correct.
It seems like a black and white decision from my point of view, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching, it's black and white. If something doesn't work, don't let the plane fly until you've fixed it or the pilots know how it works, and then that's all fine. Then that's fixed. That's black and white.
That's the position that the CAA and Europe and many countries have now taken.
Simon, I wanted to ask you, because Phil said at the beginning there that many of these planes are on order, so presumably once we're heading into sort of Easter and summer, there would have been a lot more planes on the ground. People possibly would be already bought tickets for those airlines and those flights.
Yes, yeah.
What happens to them in the summer when their plane's not there?
Well, that's a really serious question. And of course, we hope that the investigators for the terrible Ethiopian Airlines crash will have found what caused the aircraft to crash, and whatever modifications, changes are made will have taken place. But at the moment, I've just been talking to TUI Airways, the main UK operator of the type. In a few weeks, it's going to be OK. Once we get into the Easter school holidays and then into the main summer season in May, well, there are many of these aircraft due to be flying lots of holiday flights. So Ryanair, for instance, has the biggest order in Europe, 135 of these planes coming in from May. And if the aircraft aren't there, it will cause some disarray, and you might actually have the situation where airlines are having to charter in older planes to replace the brand new ones that they were expecting. But we're some way from that. And if I can just try to help people like you who have a deep-rooted anxiety about flying, it doesn't seem a natural thing to do. Aviation is incredibly safe. I mean, I've just cycled across London to be here. I took more risks in that one journey than I will in a lifetime of flying. And after this, I'm hopping on the train, going to Heathrow, catching a flight, and I know the moment I step aboard, I'm going to be as safe as I could ever be.
But you won't be getting on the 737 MAX. Were they right to ground them?
I'm entirely guided by the captain of the aircraft. If he or she thinks, yep, I'm happy to fly this aircraft, I will step on board.
But they're all under the umbrella of the CAA, so were the CAA right to ground this airplane?
I defer to their professional expertise. All I would say is that this possibly sets a precedent that might mean in future, if heaven forbid there is another crash involving a different aircraft type, do we then have to say we're going to ground that aircraft type until we find out what went wrong? It's a very, very difficult series of questions.
In most circumstances, when there is a crash, it's becoming increasingly rare, but when there is a crash, the appropriate authority will have an early analysis of the cause. And if there is a systemic thing, then you could see a fleet grounded. More probably, it will relate to that individual airplane. Maintenance, training, something. Therefore, they bring out early directives to get on top of the situation.
All right. Well, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Say safety is Boeing's #1 priority. We have full confidence in the safety of the 737 MAX. We understand that regulatory agencies and customers have made decisions that they believe appropriate for their home markets. We'll continue to engage with them to ensure they have the information needed to have confidence in operating their fleets. Thank you both very much.